Hiya everyone, welcome to my first YouTube video in a very long time. Honestly, a lot to recap on personal stuff, a lot to recap on reading, but this video I'm going to be recapping my 2023 reading. So at the time of filming this, it is November, it's mid-November, and I am aware of the fact that it's still 2023, we have a month, but I am going through a little bit of change in my life, so I'm kind of just taking stock of everything, and I just wanted to take some recap and stock of my reading and then proceed from there. So on a personal note, I guess if you've been following me, you'll know that I have kind of like been same for the last couple of years. So after I graduated in 2019, I moved home and I stayed at home for like 3-4 years. I predominantly stayed in the same job for 3 years, had the same car for 3 years, like I was all doing everything the same, and my mantra for 2023 was all about change. So changed the job, got a new job, moved to the other side of the country, sold the car, got a new car, sold the car. So this year has been a lot of change for me, and it's literally not stopping, which is careful what you wish for. But after like a summer, an autumn, and a winter in London, I am moving back to Leeds for a little while, back in with my parents for a little while, I promise, just due to some work related things. But yeah, I have had like a mad year, like very roller coaster, and my reading has been the same, and I'm reflecting on everything like I said, and wanting to reflect on my reading. It's been like kind of a weird year. It's been a weird year because like normally with TBRs, sometimes I'll do like TBR games, sometimes I'll plan my TBR, sometimes I will like, have reading goals at the beginning of the year, and then every month I will go from there. Whereas this year I've not been generally like a mood reader, but I've been going through phases of my reading. So for example, in the beginning of the year I was kind of like taking any kind of recommendations from anywhere, and then in summer I was reading really sad books in my opinion, and then in autumn I was trying classics, and then now in winter I'm just reading self-help books for some reason. So yeah, it's never been like that before, and all my old books that I would have read in the past, like my fiction books, at the moment that's the last thing I want to touch. So yeah, I thought I'd recap my reading just to help me go from there. So the first book I read and picked up this year and in January was The Queen's Fool. I feel this is very indicative of my reading from like years gone by, because anyone who knows me knows I love a historical fiction book. Make it Tudor England, I'm there. I love a Philip Gregory book, and this is everything obviously of that. It's set in like the transitional phase maybe of like Queen Mary the First until Elizabeth the First, and I really enjoyed it. Normally I would go into a book like this being like, why is it not focusing on one of the royals, like it's not giving me the entire experience, but it was refreshing having like an observer be the main character. So yeah, I give it a 4 stars in general, but I really look back on this book and I'm like, oh, I wish I could read that again. That was so refreshing. That was so good. So yeah, 4 stars for that one. So another thing, now that I'm looking at all these like stats that I've got here, I really have had an issue this year with giving anything 5 stars. So when I say 4 stars, that is kind of the common for everything. And when I say 5 stars, everyone jump. Literally, I give 1 or 2 books of 5 stars this year. The next book I read was The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and like I was saying, I was taking like at the beginning of the year just book recommendations from where I could get it, and I was just recommended the audiobook for this book. It's a short classic, and I think this taught me like what I've been missing with classics, and just some more like symbolic books in the past. Like, you have to put whatever meaning you find onto it. Like, you don't chase the meaning sometimes. You just put where you are in your life onto that. It was easier for me to do with this book. This is about a salesperson person and I work in sales, so it was easier to kind of like match like both of the experiences together. But yeah, that was quite a good one because I guess it was my first classic and it kind of broke me off to know that there are more types of classics out there, obviously, but also it taught me about like how I can put my meaning onto books. And even though people might argue that's not the right thing to do, I think sometimes you kind of have to find the symbolism instead of the symbolism finding you. So yeah, that's what I did with that one, and that got 3 stars. So after I read The Metamorphosis, I went to Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. I gave that a 4 stars. It was a beautiful book. Sometimes with reading, I'm like, things can go over my head because I'm not necessarily reading for, you know, the most literature-based things. Sometimes I do love a good gossip book. And this brought the storyline and it also brought the beauty of literature both together for me. This was a recommendation that came through TikTok. It's a really quick read and I'd recommend it if you're like maybe in a slump or if you're in a place where like your reading's kind of like all over the place like mine was at the time. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I give it a 4 stars. I didn't have anything in me which was like, this is pushing me to a 5 stars. But yeah, 4 stars definitely deserved. So at this point in the year, I must have thought, oh, I made reading resolutions and I need to follow them. So I had the reading resolution of reading more Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is an author that I really like. But specifically, I wanted to read all the books in her universe of like Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones. I wanted to finish that universe off. And one book that I picked up next, which apparently is in the order, is Malibu Rising. Now, this book is in 2 halves, for me at least. Like, you've got one timeline and then you've got another timeline. It's not going all the way through. It's like dual timelines happen at the same time. It's very set, which I actually really liked. But it kind of came as a weakness because I liked the first story. I liked the first timeline. The second one, I didn't care. I didn't care at all. So the first part is like the parents and their story. The second part is the kids. I don't care about your kids. I want to see the parents more. Because that was good. That was a good story. So yeah, I give that a 3 stars. And then I carried on with the Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was like, another one. And I read Kerry So Is Back, which I gave a 5 stars. Now, everyone make some noise, first of all. Secondly, I love this book. I think this is probably my favourite book of the year now, looking back on everything. I always say, give me a book where the main character is born in the beginning and dies at the end, and I'm happy. Because I like that level of detail. I like that level of like character development. And this isn't a book where she like is born at the beginning and dies at the end, spoiler alert. But it is detailed, it's not too detailed, it's like everything happens for a reason. There's loads of character development. Every person that you're introduced to comes and like has a full circle moment. I love this, and honestly I was on the edge of my seat in different parts of this book. If I'm gonna recommend anything, read this book. So yeah, 5 stars. So the next book is a book that I was seeing on TikTok, and it was My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Honestly, from what you see from the cover, you won't be able to like imagine what the book's about if you go into this totally unaware and just look at the cover and be like, I'm gonna read that. It's honestly, I think the one word for this book is mad. It is honestly just mad and wild. Like, it's interesting because I think like a couple of years ago, like I think the narrative of like having an unreliable narrator was like a massive thing in books and stuff, and it was quite interesting for my reading as well because it led to more like plot lines and surprises and, you know, really interesting stuff. With this one, it's kind of like that, but I would say it's more, instead of having like an unreliable narrator, you've got a narrator that you don't know. So like when you don't know your narrator, it's confusing, you're learning new things, and I think that's an interesting aspect. But overall, I just was confused, and there was also like some problematic parts of this book. For a book that was published in 2019, I kind of found that like a little bit weird, but I think this is a book that is trying to teach me the lesson where you don't have to always like the people that you read about. And I think sometimes that's something I struggle with, because if I like a character, I will sometimes give it a higher rating. If I don't like the character, sometimes I might get a lower rating. But I think that's quite a natural thing. But some people are like, you don't have to like your main character. And I'm like, well, there's that. But with this one, it didn't work out completely. So yeah, that got a 3 stars. So the next book was Normal People. This one was so hyped. Like, it was such a big thing during COVID, and I never watched the TV show, but I was like, I'm gonna read the book and then I'm gonna watch the TV show. Like, I thought, okay, when I'm ready, I'm gonna do it. And then I did it. And it wasn't for me everything. I didn't, like, it was okay, and I feel like the TV show might be better than the book, and I might have appreciated the book if I watched the TV show more. But I didn't love it. I gave it 3 stars. I can't remember too much the reason why, but just in general, it's not something that I loved. But yeah, that one came through, I would say, YouTube, that recommendation. So the next one is a book called Dirty Laundry by Richard Pink and Roxanne Emery. And this one came through, actually, how did it come to me? Through Facebook. So at this point, I remember I deleted a lot of my different like social media sites. I deleted TikTok. I like took breaks from like Twitter and Instagram. I was really trying to like minimize noise in my life at this point. It was back in, oh, I don't even have a date on this one. I don't even know when it was. March, April, maybe April, May time. I was just like, okay, I just want to take a pause. But I was still using Facebook, and I was getting this couple's content recommended to me, and a lot of their content is based around ADHD, and one person has ADHD in this couple, one person doesn't, and it was about that. But this, I was like, oh, there's so much stuff that I like empathize and like relate to, right? So anyway, I started watching their content and realized there was a lot of stuff that I found similarities in, and I was like, oh wow, they have a book, I'm gonna read the book. I read the book and I found it very interesting. Roxanne in particular tells some very like just deep stories that I found like so amazing to read. So yeah, I gave that a 4 stars, and I actually enjoyed that book. But I will say it tells you a lot about the book recommendations I was getting at the time, because I think I've named loads of different types of social medias, and so far I've like named YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, literally all over the shop. And the next one is one that I got from Twitter. So this is an author that I read before, Bolu Babalola. I read Honey and Spice, and I remember I was gonna read it in January. For some reason in January I was not gelling with the book when I first picked it up. But I picked up again later down in the year, like mid-year, and I loved it. I got really into it. It had a lot of the tropes that I love, so like enemies to lovers kind of vibes. Loved it. I gave it a 4 stars. But as I was saying, this wasn't a year where I was like giving out 5 stars all that much. But yeah, I gave it a 4 stars. That was a recommendation that I got through Twitter, because I follow the author on Twitter. I think that was the last book I read when I was living in Leeds. And then when I moved down to London, I remember I was like not reading for the first month. So I was going to film a video, which I did, I never uploaded it, about reading books that AI recommended to me. And I got 2 book suggestions, which I remember at the time I was like, why are these books so sad that is recommended to me? But the first book, actually, funnily enough, I got recommended to me in real life by a friend who was a reader at university, but I never picked it up. And then obviously I picked it up for the sake of the video that I was going to do, and it's Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Now this book, wow, it starts off being a book that you're like, this is going one way and it goes in a completely other direction. You think it's going left, it goes right. You think it's going right, it's going left. It's honestly, again, mad. Like, it's mad. Like, it's honestly mad. Like, but at the beginning, you're like, oh, this main character is, I'm not gonna like her. And then at the end, you're like rooting for her. So yeah, I give it 4 stars. This one as well, I'm gonna say, read it. So if you're gonna read Carrie Soto's Back, you need to read this as well. Like, I recommend it because it's such a roller coaster of a journey. So the second and final book that I was recommended by AI is Educated by Tara Westover. So this is my first like autobiography of this, and it's my first non-fiction of this as well. I never heard of this book before. When I was recommended it by AI, I was like really like looking forward to it. So I read it. I gave it 4 stars overall. It's such an interesting life that the author has lived, and it's a perspective I don't know a ton of. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I loved it. It was very, very interesting. My storage on my phone's a bit full at the moment, so I apologize for all the swap and change. But after kind of a year of getting my book recommendations from like different sources, and then at this point I have moved to London. After 3 months, I've only read 2 books, which puts me like so far behind, but takes me out of like my productive level, because I've said this, when I'm reading I'm most productive in life. So yeah, at this point I'm not reading as much. I'm like checking in with myself and I'm like, okay, Govinda, you need to read, but you have these reading goals, so let's try and knock both of them at the same time. So I was talking before about reading Taylor Jenkins Reid, so I was like, okay, read Forever Interrupted, which is outside of the universe that you've just read but is next in the order that you've made up on the website and through different sources. So I picked up Forever Interrupted. Wow. Not what I was, I mean, from the title it's what, like, it makes sense, but not what I went into thinking this would be, like, at all. And this brought out a completely different side of Taylor Jenkins Reid, for me at least. Like, it showed me kind of like more of her like contemporary adult like writing style. So I gave this 4 stars, and now looking back I'm like, could have been a 5. Could have been a 5. So I guess, what did I do before? I said Carrie Soto, and then I said, what was the other one? I forgot now completely. Oh, so before I said, if you read Carrie Soto first based on my recommendations. Then I said Eleanor Oliphant. Now you have to go into Taylor Jenkins Reid, Forever Interrupted, because that is such a good one. But yeah, no, I loved that. I gave that 4 stars. It was great. So yeah. Again, recap for the class. Carrie Soto is back. So this is probably my rankings of the year so far, actually, if I'm recommending these. So Carrie Soto is back. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, and then Forever Interrupted, I definitely recommend them. So I read that book, and that was quite like a heavy book for me. So I was like, okay, let me do some like comfort reading. So I went back into my Philippa Gregory books that I love, and I read The Virgin's Lover, which at this point I was like giddy. I was like, this is gonna be recapping something I'm really like, this is the part that's like, I love it. It's like Elizabeth I. Let's get into it. And I realised every time I do this with a Philippa Gregory book, maybe it's my expectations, maybe it is what it is, but I'm like, oh, I was looking forward to this one and it didn't end up being what I thought it was going to be. So anyway, The Virgin's Lover, I give it 2 stars. I know it wasn't everything that I wanted. I did that with Amber Lynn's book in this kind of series as well. I was like, went in really excited, and then I came out and I was like, okay. So yeah, I gave that 2 stars. I think that might be, let me have a look, my lowest rated book of the year. Yeah. So sorry about that. The next book, so this is when I'm going into classics now, and I only read completely one classic, but I read completely Pride and Prejudice, and I did make a video about this. I realised I knew the plot line because they did an Indian adaptation of the book when I was like younger in the 2000s. So I knew the book a little bit. I didn't go in completely unaware. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. Didn't watch the movie. I was always thinking about watching the movie. I just never got around to it. But yeah, no. Pride and Prejudice. I give that 4 stars. Now, the next book kind of started my non-fiction. Britney Spears came out with the book, and I read it and finished it on the same day. So, like, I'm not by any means, like, a stan of Britney Spears, but I really like her music. I really enjoy her. And I read her book, and it's my second 5-star. It's, like, like, this woman, I can't amplify enough how much she's been through, and just reading about the journey and reading about all the like sneaky things that happened to her was like so, again, crazy, like mad. It was mad. It was like, wow, I can't believe this much happens to a person. But I was obviously like around the 2007 2000s period. I was a child, so to think like I was a child watching all this stuff and hearing this one narrative where like in real life all the other stuff is happening behind the scenes is crazy. But yeah, I gave that a 5 stars, and that's my second and final 5 stars read of the year. So then at the end of October, I decided to do something that's like out of character for me but also in character. So I decided to do the 75 hard challenge, which is like a lot of physical things. Like you have to do a workout outdoors, you have to do a workout indoors, you have to have a particular diet, you're not allowed to drink. I did that. It lasted 10 days, by the way. But one of the caveats is that you have to read a certain amount of a non-fiction book. And I remember being like, I don't know about that. Because a lot of the like non-fiction self-help books that were being recommended were like a lot of the like hardcore stuff, and I was like, as someone who's like a fiction reader, I don't know how I can like get around this, but I realized I needed to read non-fiction books and self-help books that were based around spirituality. So I picked up The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. Now Deepak Chopra was a name that I've heard before, so I was kind of aware of them in that sense. But literally just whilst I was working at work, I was listening to an audiobook on YouTube, and it did bring some like really interesting things like into like just like my world. Like one of the laws is about karma and how you have to give and then receive, and I've always been like a big believer in karma, but it taught me about like how everything has to flow, and like how being conservative with certain things, like he talks about money, kind of brings like a restrictive mindset and kind of energy around that in your life. So that was very interesting. And then it taught me a lot about like, there's one law about silence and how important that is, and there's one law about like which I found like really thought-provoking, about like the kind of conversations that you're engaged with. So like if you're listening to the radio or listening to a song, or sometimes I'll have like TikTok or like a TV show in the background, you're actually not relaxing because you're engaged in a conversation with, you know, the TV or like the radio, because you're like listening and actively or non-actively participating in that conversation. So that was quite interesting. I give that book a 3 stars, but that was not, again, a book that I was looking for like star ratings as sometimes as I am. So yeah, that was that. Now the next book actually came through Instagram, so I think I've hit all the big social medias for book recommendations. I had a friend reading this book, so I picked it up, and it's How to Be a Boss Bitch by Christine Quinn. So Christine Quinn is my favourite from Selling Sunset, which is a reality show on Netflix. She's not on the show anymore, but I picked up the book, and now a lot of people might turn their nose up at that kind of book or that kind of like title, but she talked about some very interesting things. I remember being at work, and there's a quiz in this of kind of finding out what kind of boss bitch you are, and I was doing it at work, and one of my colleagues were like, when do you want to go on lunch? And I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm doing a quiz at the moment from this book. I'll tell you about more later. And yeah, I give it 4 stars. I loved it. I found it very interesting, and I found her story to be very interesting as well. So now, on to the final book that I've read so far. So it's kind of a book that's like always like been in my periphery. Like, I remember one of the reasons why it got back onto my radar is because I went to visit someone and they had this on their bookshelf, and I was like, oh, okay, The Secret. Okay, let me pick that up again. And I like tried to watch the movie, but one thing I hated about the movie, it was like talking about The Secret. I was like, tell me what it is. Tell me what it is. And then I remember also seeing this on Instagram as well. Another friend was reading it. So anyway, I was like, I'm gonna read it. I'm not reading all these self-help books. I might as well read The Secret. And in parts it was like hard for me. Like I was kind of like, oh, whatever. But I think overall this book taught me like your mind doesn't know reality. Like it is what you make it, and sometimes I think the secret is positive mental attitude. You've just got to be like positive about everything, which definitely has come in handy recently. Like I've just been like, I've got to be positive about this. It's gonna be fine. It's fine. Everything's more than fine. So I give this book a 4 stars because, like I said, in different parts, I was kind of like, don't agree with that kind of approach, and then also like, talk to me straight. But yeah, that was my year in reading so far. As I said, I've got 1 month to go, but also I'm really behind my reading goal, which I'm gonna use The Secret here and say I've already achieved it. It's already achieved. It's already done. But yeah, my reading goal is 26 books because I'm turning 26 this year, and I have read 18 books. So yeah, I'm behind. It says I'm 5 books behind, but I guess I'm like 8 books behind. So yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know what I'm reading next. I keep on seeing this video around where you just stop recording when you read a 5 stars, which I might do. But yeah, follow me to find out what I'm gonna read next, because I don't know. But also, it was nice talking to you guys again, talking about books. I'm gonna really focus on this YouTube channel and posting regularly, but we shall see. I mean, like I was saying, The Secret says you've got to say it, so I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna post regularly on this channel. But my next read, I don't know what it is, and my next video, I do know I will be reading until I find a 5 stars. So yeah, I'll see you then, guys. But as always, please do like, comment, and subscribe. But for now, bye.